Undercover boss orders Coney dog, freezes when waitress drops wrapper marked hidden violations. The neon sign flickered against the rain-soaked asphalt, casting broken shadows across the empty parking lot. Danny's Diner, 24 hours. It promised, though Marcus wondered if anyone actually believed that anymore. He pulled his baseball cap lower and stepped out of the borrowed pickup truck, his expensive Italian leather shoes squelching in puddles that had been there since last Tuesday. 3 months. That's how long his restaurant chain had been hemorrhaging money like a punctured artery. 27 locations across 3 states, and somehow every single quarterly report painted the same grim picture: declining profits, customer complaints, and health inspection scores that made his lawyers nervous. His board of directors had started using words like intervention and restructuring, which in corporate speak meant his head would roll if things didn't turn around fast. So here he was, Marcus Thompson, CEO of Thompson Family Restaurants, dressed like a long-haul trucker at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday, about to eat at his own establishment. The irony wasn't lost on him that he hadn't actually set foot in one of his diners in over 2 years. The bell above the door wheezed as he entered, and the smell hit him immediately: grease that had seen better decades, coffee that could strip paint, and something else he couldn't quite identify. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, one of them strobing like a dying heartbeat. "Seat yourself, Han," called a voice from behind the counter. Marcus chose a booth near the back, its red vinyl cracked and held together with silver duct tape. The waitress approached with the weariness of someone who'd been on her feet for too many hours. Her name tag read Linda, in faded letters, and she couldn't have been more than 25, though her eyes looked older. "What can I get you?" she asked, notepad already in hand. Marcus glanced at the laminated menu, noting the coffee rings and food stains that corporate would have fired someone over. "Just a Coney dog and a coffee, please. Coming right up." Linda turned toward the kitchen, then paused. "You passing through?" "Yeah," Marcus replied, settling into his role. "Heading to Detroit. This rain's got me beat." She nodded with the understanding of someone who'd served countless travelers seeking refuge from the highway. As she walked away, Marcus took in his surroundings with fresh eyes. The cash register was ancient, held together with electrical tape. Half the ceiling tiles were water-stained, and he could swear he saw something scurry across the floor near the kitchen entrance. This wasn't just neglect, this was systematic failure. And it was happening in his name. Linda returned 15 minutes later with a plate that looked like it had survived a small war. The Coney dog sat in a bun that had seen better days, smothered in chili that had the consistency of motor oil and topped with onions that had probably been chopped sometime during the Clinton administration. "Here you go," she said, setting it down with a slight tremor in her hands that Marcus initially attributed to fatigue. As she turned to leave, her apron caught the edge of the table, and something fluttered to the floor. A crumpled food wrapper, the kind that came with their prepackaged burger patties. Linda's face went white as she lunged for it, but Marcus was closer. He bent down and picked up the wrapper, and that's when he saw it. Scrawled across the inside in faint black marker, barely visible under the grease stains, were 4 words that made his blood freeze. "Hidden violations, do not report." Underneath, in different handwriting, were cryptic notes. "Temp log 3 hours." And, "Manager knows says wait." Marcus looked up to find Linda staring at him with the expression of a deer caught in headlights. Her hands were shaking now, not from exhaustion, but from pure, undiluted terror. "This yours?" he asked casually, holding up the wrapper. "I know. I mean," Linda stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's just trash. Kitchen waste. You know how it is." But Marcus had spent 20 years building a business empire. He knew fear when he saw it, and Linda was drowning in it. Her eyes darted toward the kitchen, then back to him, then to the exits like she was calculating escape routes. "No problem," he said gently, handing her the wrapper. "We all drop things sometimes." Linda snatched it like it was on fire and stuffed it deep into her apron pocket. "Thanks," she whispered, then practically fled toward the counter. Marcus sat there, the untouched Coney dog growing cold on his plate, watching Linda whisper frantically to the cook, a thin man with hollow cheeks who kept glancing in his direction. Whatever they were discussing, it was making them both increasingly agitated. He pulled out his phone and pretended to scroll through messages while his mind raced. Hidden violations. Do not report. Those 4 words opened up a chasm of possibilities, each one worse than the last. What were his employees hiding? And more importantly, from whom? The coffee tasted like liquid despair, but Marcus forced himself to drink it while he observed. In the next 20 minutes, he counted no fewer than 6 health code violations just from his seat: a cook who didn't wash his hands after handling raw meat, a dishwasher who used the same rag to clean tables and wipe down the grill, and a manager who emerged from the back office just long enough to smoke a cigarette directly outside the kitchen door. But it was the way the staff moved that told the real story. They communicated in glances and subtle gestures, like prisoners who'd developed their own secret language. When the manager, a heavy-set man named Carl according to his name tag, walked through the dining area, everyone suddenly became very focused on their tasks, their movements sharp and efficient. The moment he disappeared back into his office, the invisible tension eased just enough for Marcus to notice it had been there at all. He left a $20 tip on a $12 meal and walked out into the rain, his mind churning. The wrapper was still burning in his memory. Hidden violations, do not report. Those words suggested something far worse than simple corner-cutting or lazy management. They implied a systematic cover-up, a conspiracy of silence that reached deep into his organization. As he sat in the pickup truck, rain drumming on the roof, Marcus realized he hadn't just stumbled onto a failing restaurant. He'd discovered evidence of something that could destroy everything he'd built, not just financially, but legally and morally. The question was, how deep did this rabbit hole go? He started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, but instead of heading to his hotel, he drove to the 24-hour pharmacy across town. He had some research to do, and something told him he was going to need a lot more than coffee to get through what came next. The wrapper had opened a door he couldn't close, and Marcus Thompson was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one that's been hiding in plain sight all along. Marcus spent 3 hours that night in his hotel room, laptop open, surrounded by financial reports and inspection documents he'd pulled from the corporate database. What he found made his stomach turn. Danny's Diner, the location he just visited, showed perfect health inspection scores for the past 18 months. Every single report glowed with praise. Exemplary food safety practices, outstanding cleanliness standards, model establishment. Yet he'd witnessed 6 violations in 20 minutes. Someone was lying. The question was whether it was his inspectors, his managers, or both. At 7 a.m. sharp, Marcus was back in the pickup truck, parked across the street from Danny's Diner. He watched the morning shift arrive, tired-looking people clutching coffee cups like lifelines, their shoulders already sagging under invisible weight. Linda wasn't among them. Her shift must have ended after midnight. But something made him stay. At 8:15, a black sedan pulled into the parking lot. Marcus recognized the driver immediately, James Hartford, his regional manager for the Northeast District. Hartford was supposed to be in Boston today for a quarterly review meeting. What was he doing here? Marcus watched Hartford stride into the diner like he owned the place, which, technically, he did represent the owner. But there was something predatory about his movements, the way his presence made the visible staff instantly tense. 20 minutes later, Hartford emerged, but not alone. Linda walked beside him, still wearing yesterday's uniform, her face pale and drawn. They stood by Hartford's car, and even from across the street, Marcus could see the animated discussion. Hartford was doing most of the talking, his hands moving in sharp, aggressive gestures. Linda kept nodding, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to disappear. Then Hartford handed her something, an envelope. Linda took it, but her body language screamed reluctance. She said something brief, Hartford replied, and then she walked quickly toward an old Honda Civic parked at the far end of the lot. Marcus made a split-second decision. As Hartford's sedan pulled out in the opposite direction, Marcus followed Linda's Honda. She drove to a small apartment complex about 10 minutes away, one of those places where the American dream goes to die quietly. Marcus parked and waited, unsure of his next move. Walking up to a scared employee's home felt like crossing a line he couldn't uncross. Linda made the decision for him. She emerged from her apartment 15 minutes later, moving with the frantic energy of someone who just made a terrible decision. She got back in her Honda and drove straight to a different location, Danny's Diner number 847, about 20 miles south. This wasn't her scheduled shift. Marcus was certain of that. He followed at a distance, his mind racing. Why would Linda drive to a different location? Why had Hartford given her that envelope? And why did everything about their interaction feel like a threat disguised as a business meeting? At Diner number 847, Marcus watched Linda enter through the employee entrance. She stayed inside for exactly 37 minutes, he timed it. When she came out, she was no longer carrying the envelope. But she was crying. Marcus felt something twist in his chest as he watched this young woman sit in her car, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Whatever Hartford had asked her to do, it had cost her something important. He made another impulsive decision. As Linda's Honda pulled out of the parking lot, Marcus followed her to a gas station a few blocks away. She was pumping gas when he approached, having abandoned the pickup truck for a more direct confrontation. "Linda?" She spun around, and when she saw him, her face went through a rainbow of emotions, confusion, recognition, and then pure terror. "You," she whispered. "Oh God, you followed me. I'm not who you think I am," Marcus said quickly, raising his hands in a peaceful gesture. "I'm not with Hartford, I'm not a corporate spy, and I'm not going to hurt you." "Then who are you?" Her voice was barely audible. Marcus took a breath, knowing that his next words would change everything. "My name is Marcus Thompson. I own the restaurants." The color drained completely from Linda's face. She stumbled backward, her hand reaching for the car door handle. "Wait," Marcus said urgently. "Please. That wrapper you dropped last night, I need to understand what it means." "I don't know what you're talking about," Linda said automatically, but her eyes were wide with panic. "Hidden violations. Do not report. Those were your words, weren't they?" Linda's composure cracked completely. "He said someone might come asking questions," she whispered. "He said if anyone knew about the wrappers, we'd all lose our jobs. Our families would suffer." "Who said that?" "Hartford. This morning. He gave me money to keep quiet and told me to clean up any evidence at the other locations." Tears were streaming down her face now. "I have 2 kids, Mr. Thompson. I can't lose this job. But I can't keep doing this either." Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his feet. This wasn't just about health violations or corner cutting. This was systematic intimidation, witness tampering, and God knows what else. "Linda," he said gently, "what exactly are you being asked to keep quiet about?" She looked around frantically, as if Hartford might materialize from the shadows. "Everything," she whispered. "All of it." Marcus convinced Linda to meet him the next evening at a 24-hour Denny's, neutral territory where they could talk without fear of Hartford's surveillance. What she told him over lukewarm coffee and untouched pie made him realize he wasn't dealing with simple negligence. He was staring into the heart of an empire built on systematic abuse. "The wrappers started about 8 months ago," Linda explained, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah, she works the morning shift at location 23, came up with the idea. Management confiscates anything official. Write a complaint on company paper? It disappears. Try to document violations on your phone? They check our phones now during shift changes." Marcus felt sick. "They search your phones? Hartford implemented it 3 months ago. Called it a security measure to prevent employees from sharing trade secrets." Linda laughed bitterly. The only secret was how bad things really were. She pulled out a crumpled napkin from her purse. Even in the dim diner light, Marcus could see faded writing. Meat thawed 3 days / roach nest freezer / manager drunk 2 p.m. shift. This is from yesterday, Linda said. Before I had to clean up. The next morning, Marcus visited location number 852 in Millbrook, 50 miles east. He'd called ahead, posing as a traveling salesman looking for a quick breakfast. The manager, a nervous woman named Carol, seemed eager to please the well-dressed stranger who might become a regular customer. But Marcus wasn't watching Carol. He was watching the staff. The pattern was identical: frightened glances, whispered conversations that died when management appeared, and corners cut so sharp they could draw blood. The grill hadn't been properly cleaned in days. Grease buildup was so thick it had formed stalactites. The walk-in cooler door hung open, broken seal allowing cold air to escape and warm air to spoil the food inside. But the most damning evidence came when Marcus, accidentally, knocked over a trash can near the prep station. Among the normal refuse, he spotted 3 wrapper fragments with familiar markings. He palmed one while helping the flustered busboy clean up the mess. Later, in his truck, he unfolded the scrap and felt his heart sink. Expired beef, 1 week pass / overtime unpaid, 47 hours / pest traps ignored, management aware. Below that, in different handwriting. Health INSP bribed, $500 cash / Carol knows, says keep quiet or families suffer. The corruption reached the health inspectors. Marcus's hands trembled as he photographed the wrapper with his phone. His 20-year business empire wasn't just failing, it was criminal. Location number 901 in Riverside painted an even uglier picture. The manager, a heavy-set man named Rick, treated his staff like prisoners. Marcus watched him berate a teenage dishwasher for taking a bathroom break, dock a waitress's pay for dropping a plate, and openly threaten a cook who questioned why they were serving chicken that smelled funny. Marcus ordered coffee and sat in the corner booth, invisible in his trucker disguise, and witnessed what could only be described as workplace terrorism. Rick ruled through fear, and his staff responded with the hollow-eyed compliance of people who'd had their spirits systematically broken. But they were still fighting back in their own way. This time, Marcus didn't need to find the wrappers, he watched them being created. A waitress named Maria scribbled notes on the inside of a burger wrapper during her smoke break. Rick threatens fired if we report roaches / freezer temp 55 degrees / kids menu meat moldy. She folded it carefully and tucked it into her shoe. The ingenuity broke Marcus's heart. These people had created an underground resistance movement using the very symbols of their oppression, food wrappers that represented the corporate machine grinding them down. That evening, Marcus sat in his hotel room staring at photographs of 7 different wrapper fragments. Each one told the same story: systematic violations, management intimidation, bribed inspectors, and employees living in terror of losing jobs they desperately needed to survive. But one detail kept nagging at him. All the wrappers mentioned the same phrase: management aware, or manager knows. This wasn't rogue behavior by individual bad apples. This was coordinated policy from above. He opened his laptop and accessed the company's internal communications system. What he found in Hartford's email archives made everything click into place. Subject lines that made his blood boil: cost reduction targets, compliance optional, and Q3 bonuses tied to inspection scores, get creative. And, most damning, employee documentation concerns, implement phone searches immediately. Hartford wasn't just covering up violations. He was actively encouraging them while silencing witnesses. Marcus scrolled through months of emails, each one more damning than the last. Hartford had created a system where managers were rewarded for cutting corners and punished for reporting problems. Health inspectors were on the payroll. Employees were systematically terrorized into silence. But the final email, sent just 2 days ago, made Marcus's vision blur with rage. Phase 2 cleanup initiated. Problem employees being relocated or terminated. New protocols for evidence disposal in effect immediately. Bonus structure remains tied to maintaining perfect inspection scores. Remember, what management doesn't know officially can't hurt quarterly reports. Marcus understood now. Hartford hadn't just built a cover-up. He'd built a machine designed to generate bonuses through deliberate negligence while maintaining plausible deniability for corporate leadership. The wrappers weren't just evidence of violations. They were proof of a conspiracy that reached into every level of his organization, enriching managers while poisoning customers and terrorizing workers. Marcus closed the laptop and reached for his phone. Tomorrow, he would dig deeper. Tonight, he needed to figure out how to dismantle an empire of corruption without destroying the innocent people trapped inside it. Marcus waited until 10 a.m. before making the call, knowing Hartford would be finishing his morning inspection rounds, which Marcus now understood were actually intimidation tours designed to silence potential whistleblowers. He dialed Hartford's direct line from the hotel room, using a voice modulator app he'd downloaded to disguise his identity. To Hartford, he would be Mike Rodriguez, a concerned truck driver who'd eaten at several locations and had questions about what he'd witnessed. James Hartford speaking. Mr. Hartford, my name is Mike Rodriguez. I'm a long-haul trucker, and I've been eating at your Danny's locations for the past few months. I've got some concerns I think you should know about. There was a pause. Marcus could practically hear the calculations happening in Hartford's mind. What kind of concerns, Mr. Rodriguez? Marcus kept his voice carefully neutral. Food safety issues. Cleanliness problems. Staff that seem, well, scared. I'm not trying to cause trouble, but I've seen some things that don't seem right. I appreciate you calling, Hartford replied, his voice taking on that smooth, practiced tone Marcus recognized from countless corporate meetings. But I have to tell you, we maintain the highest standards across all our locations. We undergo rigorous health inspections regularly, and I'm proud to say we've received perfect scores across the board. Perfect scores? Marcus pressed. Even at the Millbrook location? Because I saw some pretty questionable meat handling there yesterday. Mr. Rodriguez, I think there might be some misunderstanding. Our Millbrook location just passed its monthly inspection with flying colors. We have the documentation to prove it. Sometimes what looks concerning to customers is actually standard industry practice. The lie came so smoothly, so confidently, that Marcus almost admired the skill behind it. Hartford wasn't just covering up. He was gaslighting anyone who dared question the system. What about employee complaints? Marcus pushed. I've heard staff mentioning some issues. Hartford's tone shifted subtly, becoming cooler. Mr. Rodriguez, I'm curious. Why are you asking so many specific questions? Are you perhaps working with a competitor? Or maybe a journalist? The paranoia in Hartford's voice confirmed what Marcus suspected. This man lived in constant fear of exposure. Just a concerned customer, Marcus insisted. But if you're not interested in feedback. No. Hartford backtracked quickly. Customer feedback is always welcome. Tell you what. Why don't you email me your specific concerns? I'll look into each one personally and get back to you with detailed responses. Marcus almost laughed. Hartford wanted written documentation so he could track down the source and eliminate it. That's okay, Marcus said. I was hoping to discuss this over the phone. Mr. Rodriguez. Hartford's voice took on an edge. I've been managing these restaurants for 8 years. I know every location, every employee, every process. What you're describing simply doesn't happen in my district. Our numbers don't lie. Customer satisfaction scores, health inspection results, profit margins, everything shows we're running a tight, clean operation. Your profit margins are actually down 17% this quarter, Marcus said quietly. Dead silence. How would you know that? Hartford's voice was sharp now, dangerous. Marcus had made a mistake. No truck driver would have access to quarterly financial reports. But the slip revealed something crucial. Hartford's perfect confidence was built on lies he'd started believing himself. Lucky guess, Marcus covered. Word travels in the trucking community when restaurants start cutting corners. Mr. Rodriguez, I think this conversation is over. If you have legitimate complaints, file them through official channels. Otherwise, I suggest you find somewhere else to eat. The line went dead. Marcus sat staring at his phone, processing what he'd learned. Hartford wasn't just corrupt, he was delusional. He'd constructed such an elaborate fiction around his district's performance that he genuinely believed his own lies. The perfect inspection scores, the glowing customer satisfaction reports, the claims of tight management. Hartford lived in a fantasy world where terrorizing employees and bribing inspectors somehow translated to business success. But that delusion made him dangerous. People who believed their own lies would go to extreme lengths to protect them. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop asking questions about things that don't concern you. Some conversations have consequences." His blood ran cold. Somehow, Hartford had identified him despite the voice modulator. Which meant Hartford had resources Marcus didn't know about, resources that could track phone calls, trace identities, and reach out to threaten people who got too close to the truth. Marcus realized with growing dread that he wasn't just fighting corruption anymore. He was in an active war with people who had everything to lose and no moral boundaries to stop them from fighting dirty. His empire wasn't just built on lies, it was defended by people willing to destroy anyone who threatened to expose them. The question now wasn't whether he could fix the problem. The question was whether he could survive long enough to try. The threatening text changed everything. Marcus ditched his hotel, paid cash for a room at a sketchy motel on the outskirts of town, and spent the night planning his next move. Hartford's ability to track his phone call meant the corruption had resources Marcus hadn't anticipated, possibly law enforcement contacts, certainly surveillance capabilities. But it also meant Hartford was scared enough to show his hand. Marcus waited 3 days before returning to the original Danny's Diner, this time at 2 a.m. when Linda would be finishing her shift. He parked behind a dumpster and watched until she emerged alone, shoulders slumped with exhaustion. "Linda," he stepped out of the shadows carefully, hands visible. "Please don't run." She spun around, and her face cycled through the now familiar sequence: confusion, recognition, and terror. "Mr. Thompson? What are you doing here? If Hartford sees you..." "Hartford threatened me," Marcus said quietly. "Which means he's as scared as you are." Linda glanced around frantically. "We can't talk here. He has people watching sometimes." "Then where?" She hesitated, clearly torn between self-preservation and something that might have been hope. "Follow me. But stay back, if anyone sees us together." Linda drove to a 24-hour laundromat in the industrial district, the kind of place where night shift workers and insomniacs sought fluorescent refuge. She chose a corner near the broken security camera and fed quarters into a washing machine she didn't need. "Hartford came back yesterday," she said without preamble. "He's asking questions about who you really are. He knows someone's been digging around." "What did you tell him?" "Nothing. But he's not just asking me." Linda's voice dropped to a whisper. "He's pulling employees in one by one. Sarah from location 23, Rick from Riverside, even Carol from Millbrook. People are disappearing from the schedule, Mr. Thompson. Permanent schedule changes, he calls it." Marcus felt ice in his veins. "Disappearing how?" "Transfers to locations 300 miles away. Sudden terminations for performance issues. Sarah got transferred to a diner in Montana with 12 hours' notice. Her kids are in school here, she can't just leave." The full scope of Hartford's operation became clear. This wasn't just about hiding health violations or skimming profits. This was witness elimination on a systematic scale. "Linda," Marcus said carefully, "I need you to trust me. Do you still have those wrappers? The ones you mentioned before?" She studied his face for a long moment. "You could fire me right now. Have me arrested. Destroy my life with one phone call. But I haven't." "No," she agreed. "You haven't." She made a decision that would change both their lives. "Wait here." Linda returned 20 minutes later carrying a shoebox that looked like it had survived a flood. Inside, Marcus found the most damning evidence he'd ever seen in his life. Dozens of wrappers, napkins, and scraps of paper covered in handwriting from different employees across multiple locations. But these weren't just random complaints. They were a meticulously documented catalog of crimes spanning 8 months. Freezer temp 65 degrees, 3 days / roaches in flour bins / manager Rick sells expired meat to schools. Read one wrapper from location 901. Another, from location 23. Hartford pays health insp. Johnson $800 per month / told Sarah keep quiet or lose custody of kids / overtime theft equals $2,400 last month. The most chilling came from location 847. Employee Jessica asked questions. Hartford had her arrested on drug charges / planted evidence in her locker / she's clean. Has been for 2 years. Jesus Christ. Marcus whispered, his hands shaking as he read wrapper after wrapper. Linda, this is evidence of felony crimes. Extortion, bribery, false imprisonment. I know, her voice was barely audible. That's why I kept them. I thought maybe someday someone would care enough to listen. Marcus looked up at her. This 25-year-old waitress who'd been carrying the weight of an entire criminal conspiracy in a shoebox under her bed. How many people know about this collection? Just me. Sarah started it, but she gave me everything before Hartford transferred her. She said I was the only one she trusted not to break. The responsibility in Linda's voice broke something inside Marcus. This young woman had risked everything to preserve evidence of crimes being committed in his name, using his restaurants as cover. Linda, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. She nodded. Do you believe I knew about any of this? She was quiet for so long Marcus thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, 3 months ago, I would have said yes. Rich men don't get rich by accident, and they don't stay rich by being ignorant. She paused. But rich men also don't usually sit in laundromats at 3 a.m. asking scared waitresses for help. Will you help me stop this? Mr. Thompson, Linda said quietly. I've been waiting 8 months for someone to ask me that question. Armed with Linda's evidence, Marcus knew his next move had to be surgical. The wrappers mentioned Health Inspector Johnson by name, along with specific bribe amounts. If Marcus could flip Johnson, he'd have testimony that could bring down the entire network. But first, he needed to understand exactly how deep the corruption ran. Marcus spent 2 days researching Johnson's background through public records. What he found painted a disturbing picture. A 20-year veteran inspector whose financial situation had dramatically improved over the past year. New car, mortgage paid off, kids in private school, all on a government salary that barely covered rent. The plan was simple but risky. Marcus would approach Johnson as a concerned business owner from out of state, someone looking to expand into the area who'd heard, concerning rumors, about local restaurant conditions. He'd offer Johnson a consulting fee for an honest assessment of the market, enough money to make Johnson comfortable, but not so much as to raise suspicion. They met at a coffee shop downtown, Johnson arriving in his new BMW and wearing a watch that cost more than most people's monthly salary. He was a thin man in his 50s with the nervous energy of someone constantly looking over his shoulder. Mr. Williams, Johnson said, using the fake name Marcus had provided. I appreciate you reaching out. It's not often I get consulting opportunities like this. Marcus played his part perfectly, the cautious investor concerned about regulatory compliance. I've heard great things about your district's restaurants. Particularly the Danny's Diner chain. Perfect inspection scores across the board, from what I understand. Johnson's chest puffed with pride. Those establishments maintain exceptional standards. Some of the cleanest operations I've seen in 2 decades of inspection work. Really? Because I have to be honest, I ate at a few locations, and I saw some things that concerned me. Johnson's demeanor shifted instantly, the practiced smile fading. What kind of things? Marcus pulled out his phone and showed photos he'd taken during his undercover visits. The grease buildup, the broken cooler seals, the unsanitary food handling. This was just from casual observation. As someone looking to invest in the area, I need to know if this represents normal standards. Johnson stared at the photos, his face going pale. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, where did you take these? Does it matter? Mr. Williams? Johnson's voice dropped to a whisper. I think you should delete those photos and forget about investing in restaurants in this district. Why? Johnson looked around frantically, then leaned forward. Because asking questions about those particular establishments is dangerous. For both of us. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Johnson wasn't just corrupt, he was terrified. Dangerous how? You don't understand, Johnson said, his hands shaking slightly. This isn't just about passing inspections. There are people involved in this who don't accept problems. They solve them. What people? Johnson stood abruptly. This meeting is over. My advice? Invest somewhere else. Anywhere else. But as Johnson turned to leave, Marcus played his final card. I know about the payments, Johnson. $800 a month. Cash. Johnson froze. Sit down, Marcus said quietly. Please. Johnson sat, his face ashen. How do you? I know about Hartford. I know about the threats against employees. I know about Jessica and the planted evidence. I know about the transfers, the intimidation, the whole network. Johnson's composure cracked completely. If you know all that, then you know what they'll do to anyone who talks. They don't just fire people, Mr. Williams. They destroy them. Completely. Who's they? Hartford answers to someone higher up. Someone with connections. Real connections. Johnson's voice was barely audible. Police, judges, prosecutors. I tried to refuse the first payment, you know. Wanted to do my job honestly. Then my daughter got arrested for possession, drugs that weren't hers, planted in her car during a routine traffic stop. The charges disappeared after I accepted Hartford's arrangement. Marcus felt the world tilt. This wasn't just corporate corruption, it was organized crime with law enforcement protection. How many inspectors? In this region? All of them. You don't get a choice. They make you an offer that comes with consequences for refusing. Johnson, Marcus said carefully. What if I told you I could protect you? What if I told you I had the resources to bring this whole thing down? Johnson laughed bitterly. With what? Photos of dirty grills? You think that matters when they own the people who would investigate those photos? Marcus made a decision that would either save his company or destroy his life. What if I told you I'm Marcus Thompson, the owner of Thompson Family Restaurants? Johnson's eyes went wide. You're the man whose name is on all those restaurants. The man whose reputation is being destroyed while criminals get rich using my business as cover. Johnson stared at him for a long moment. Then, quietly, they're going to kill you. Maybe. But not if we move fast enough. Not if we gather enough evidence to take them all down at once. Johnson was quiet for so long Marcus thought he'd lost him. Finally, what do you need? Names. Documentation. Everyone in the network, from Hartford down to the cops taking bribes. And in return? Protection. New identity if necessary. And enough money to start over somewhere safe. Johnson nodded slowly. There's a meeting tomorrow night. Monthly coordination session. Hartford, 3 other regional managers, 2 police lieutenants, and a county prosecutor. They divide up the territory, set payment schedules, discuss problem employees. Where? Private room at the Riverside Country Club. 9 p.m. Marcus smiled grimly. Then that's where we end this. The Riverside Country Club's parking lot was nearly empty at 8:45 p.m., just expensive cars belonging to men who'd grown comfortable believing they were untouchable. Marcus sat in a rented van 50 yards away, watching through binoculars as Hartford arrived with 3 other regional managers Marcus recognized from corporate photos. Linda sat beside him, a digital recorder in her lap and Johnson's stolen meeting notes spread across her knees. You sure about this? She whispered. No, Marcus admitted. But we're past the point of safe choices. The plan was insane but necessary. Johnson had provided them with security codes, meeting room location, and most importantly, the ventilation shaft that connected to the building's old service tunnels. Marcus would record the meeting while Linda remained in the van with emergency contacts ready, FBI field office, state attorney general, and 3 different news organizations. If Marcus didn't return in 2 hours, Linda had instructions to release everything. At 8:55, Marcus crawled through the service tunnel beneath the country club, guided by Johnson's hand-drawn map. The building was old, built when wealthy men conducted business in rooms designed for secrecy. The irony wasn't lost on him. He reached the ventilation grate above the private dining room just as voices began filtering through. Marcus activated the recording app on his phone and pressed his ear to the metal slats. "Quarterly reports look clean," Hartford's voice carried clearly. "All inspections showing perfect scores, employee complaints down to 0, profit margins stabilizing. What about the Thompson situation?" An unfamiliar voice, one of the other regional managers. "Handled," Hartford replied confidently. "Mike Rodriguez turned out to be some kind of corporate spy, but we tracked his phone. Sent him a message that convinced him to back off." Marcus's blood chilled. They thought their threat had worked. "Good," said another voice Marcus didn't recognize. "Because the last thing we need is corporate attention. This arrangement works for everyone as long as it stays invisible." "Speaking of arrangements," Hartford continued, "we need to discuss payment adjustments. Inspector costs are going up. Johnson wants $1,000 a month now, and the other inspectors are getting restless. Greedy bastards," someone muttered. "It's supply and demand," said a new voice, older and carrying authority. "We control the supply of clean inspections. They demand protection for their restaurants. Price goes up when the risk increases." Marcus realized he was listening to a criminal enterprise that had systematized corruption into a business model. "What about the employee situation?" the authoritative voice continued. "Any more problems with documentation?" "Under control," Hartford said. "We've relocated 12 problem employees in the past month. The rest got the message." "Relocated," Marcus thought bitterly. Like people were inventory to be shuffled around. "The drug plant on that Jessica girl worked perfectly," another voice added with satisfaction. "She won't be asking questions from county lockup." Marcus's hands clenched into fists. They were discussing framing an innocent woman like it was a routine business decision. But then Hartford said something that made Marcus's world explode. "Actually, we might have a bigger problem. The Thompson situation might not be as handled as I thought. I've been reviewing some financial irregularities, and it looks like someone with high-level system access has been pulling internal documents." Silence fell over the room. "How high level?" the authority voice asked, ice cold now. "CO level," Hartford admitted. "Someone accessed my email archives, financial reports, inspection databases. Everything." "Jesus Christ, Hartford. Are you telling us Marcus Thompson himself might be investigating his own company?" "It's possible." The silence stretched until Marcus could hear his own heartbeat. Then, "If Thompson's investigating, he already knows enough to destroy us all. This goes from containment to elimination." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice water. "You're talking about..." Hartford started. "I'm talking about survival." The authority voice cut him off. "Thompson dies, this whole thing gets blamed on a rogue regional manager who went off the rails. Company gets new management, we negotiate with whoever takes over, business continues. That's a hell of an escalation," one of the regional managers said nervously. "It's necessary. Hartford, I want Thompson found and eliminated within 48 hours. Make it look like an accident, heart attack, car crash, whatever. But he cannot be allowed to expose this network." Marcus's phone slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering against the metal vent. In the silence that followed, he heard chairs scraping against the floor below. "What was that?" Footsteps moved quickly toward the door. Marcus knew he had seconds before they investigated every possible source of the noise. He grabbed his phone and began crawling backward through the tunnel as fast as he could, his heart hammering against his ribs. Behind him, he heard the authoritative voice giving orders. "Find him. Now." Marcus reached the van just as car engines started roaring to life in the country club parking lot. Linda took one look at his face and started the engine without a word. "Drive," Marcus gasped. They're going to kill me! Tonight. As they sped toward the highway, Marcus realized the confrontation wasn't over, it had just begun. And now it was a race between exposure and elimination, with his life as the stakes. Linda drove while Marcus made the most important phone calls of his life. First, the FBI field office, where he played the country club recording over the phone to a stunned agent who immediately dispatched a protection detail. Second, his lawyer, who began preparing emergency injunctions. Third, the state attorney general, who listened to 15 seconds of the recording before putting Marcus on hold to wake up a judge. By dawn, Marcus Thompson was in federal protective custody, and the most comprehensive restaurant industry corruption investigation in U.S. history was underway. The dominoes fell with breathtaking speed. Johnson, granted immunity in exchange for testimony, revealed the scope of the network: 43 restaurants across 6 states, 12 health inspectors, 8 police officers, 2 judges, and a county prosecutor, all taking regular payments. The scheme had generated over $23 million in bribes while systematically poisoning customers and terrorizing employees. Hartford was arrested at his home at 6 a.m., still in pajamas, clutching his phone as he tried to warn other members of the network. The recording from the country club meeting made his prosecution a formality. Conspiracy to commit murder carried a life sentence in federal court. But the most satisfying arrest came when they raided the county jail and found Jessica Martinez in solitary confinement, still proclaiming her innocence after 3 months of imprisonment on fabricated drug charges. The planted evidence Hartford's people had bragged about disappeared from the evidence locker the day she was arrested, destroyed to prevent anyone from proving it was fake. Jessica walked out of jail into a crowd of reporters, with Marcus personally apologizing and a 7-figure settlement already being prepared by his legal team. The media circus was brutal but necessary. Marcus held a press conference where he displayed Linda's shoebox of wrappers, now evidence in multiple federal cases, and read from them directly. "These are the voices of my employees," he said, his hands steady despite everything. "People who risked their jobs, their safety, their families' security to document crimes being committed in my name. They created a resistance movement using food wrappers because that was the only safe way to preserve the truth." He held up a wrapper covered in Linda's careful handwriting. "This says hidden violations, do not report today, we're reporting everything." The stock price collapsed overnight. Thompson Family Restaurants lost 40% of its value in 24 hours. Shareholders demanded Marcus's resignation. Board members called for emergency meetings. The company teetered on the edge of bankruptcy. Marcus didn't care. He spent the next 6 months personally visiting every single restaurant location, firing corrupt managers, implementing new oversight systems, and meeting with employees who'd been terrorized into silence. At each location, he held all-hands meetings where he displayed the wrappers and asked a simple question. "What else do you need to tell me?" The answers were devastating and liberating in equal measure. Years of suppressed complaints, ignored safety violations, unpaid overtime, and management abuse poured out in a flood of testimony that led to 17 additional arrests and $42 million in back wages paid to employees. Linda became the cornerstone of the company's rehabilitation. Marcus promoted her to Director of Employee Relations, a position he created specifically for her, with a mandate to design systems that would prevent employees from ever needing to hide evidence in food wrappers again. Her first initiative was the Wrapper Hotline, a direct, anonymous reporting system that bypassed all management levels and went straight to an independent oversight board. Employees could report anything, anytime, without fear of retaliation. The second initiative was the Linda Protocol. Any employee could request an immediate, confidential meeting with corporate leadership without their manager's knowledge or approval. 6 months after the arrests, Marcus stood in the original Danny's Diner where it all began, watching Linda train new managers on ethical practices. The restaurant had been completely renovated, new equipment, new procedures, new culture. "You know what the strangest part is?" Linda said, joining him at the counter. "What? I actually feel safe at work now. For the first time in 2 years, I don't spend every shift looking over my shoulder. Marcus nodded, then pulled out something from his jacket pocket. The original wrapper that Linda had dropped that first night, now preserved in a clear evidence bag returned by the FBI after the trials concluded. "I want to frame this," he said. "Put it in our corporate headquarters." A reminder that ignoring voices leads to corruption, but listening to them leads to justice. Linda smiled. What should the plaque say? Marcus thought for a moment. Hidden violations, now reported. The company survived, though it was forever changed. Profits remained lower as Marcus refused to cut corners that had previously boosted margins. But employee satisfaction soared, customer complaints dropped to near zero, and Marcus slept better than he had in years. Most importantly, the wrappers were gone. Not because employees were scared to document problems, but because there were no longer problems worth hiding. The truth, it turned out, was the best business model of all.